just how good is Luka Doncic?
Luka Doncic is the best 20-year-old player in the history of the NBA.
I'm going to say it on national television. Luka's the best white boy I've seen since Larry Bird.
His ceiling is one of the 10 greatest players ever.
Bang! Bang! Luka Doncic is absolutely putting on a show here in the Valley. Down goes Johnson, three, they're shredding him against Gobert, tailed by McDaniels. Crawford! Dagger!
Quite literally, the craziest trade in NBA history just went down.
The most shocking trade, I think, in the history of the NBA.
There's no way this is real.
Slovenia, Luka Doncic.
But why? Why did the Mavericks trade prime Luka for AD and one pick?
Can you explain why the hell they came to that conclusion?
I don't know.
The #1 pick goes to the Dallas Mavericks.
Last night was a big night for the NBA as the draft lottery took place and everybody immediately said it was rigged.
Why shouldn't you be fired?
Well, one, I think I've done a really good job here.
At 25, they traded probably the best scorer in the NBA at 25, and he didn't know about it. So it's a lot more digging somebody got to do to find out why he got traded.
So what the hell just happened? Luka and the Dallas Mavericks appeared to be a match made in heaven. The organization, led by longtime owner Mark Cuban, consistently praised Luka and claimed they wanted to build around him for years to come. Luka was just as receptive in his appreciation. Coming all the way from Slovenia to America at just the age of 19, he saw Dallas, Texas as a place he truly belonged in. In an NBA era full of vicious trade requests, Luka was one of the few superstars who made it clear that he had no plans of dishing his newfound home. He wanted to win a championship in Dallas. Entering early 2025, there were no indications that this mindset had changed on either side. Like any normal team, there were a fair share of ups and downs, but ultimately, the Luka Mavericks tandem had optimism in the air. That was the case until one night on February 1st, 2025, when basketball history as we know it would change forever. It's a trade that wouldn't have been accepted in NBA 2K. On the morning of February 1st, 5 days before the trade deadline, Luka Doncic was shockingly moved to the Los Angeles Lakers for a package featuring Anthony Davis and who even cares. It was one thing to trade Luka. That itself was shocking. But to move him without any warning and without maximizing his value was worthy of life imprisonment for crimes against humanity. What were the Mavericks doing? How could Nico Harrison even get away with this? What happened behind the scenes that led to this? Did the NBA force the Mavs to make this trade with Cooper Flagg as a promised reward? Did the Mavs ownership do this because they wanted to move the team to Vegas? These are the questions that will spark debate across the sports world for years to come. And if you're one of the many people rightfully confused and asking the same things, you've come to the right place. Today, we'll be answering all the questions of what happened to Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks, starting all the way from the beginning in 2018.
No, he didn't! Breaking ankles is Luka Doncic.
Entering the 2018 NBA draft, Luka Doncic had already cemented himself as perhaps the greatest international prospect ever. By the age of 19, he became the youngest MVP in EuroLeague history and led his squad Real Madrid to a EuroLeague championship. You'd think with all these pros, he'd be a no-brainer for the first pick. But no, he dropped all the way down to 3, because these 3 teams were incredibly stupid. It's truly a miracle that Luka ever fell to the Mavericks in the first place, and they should have taken that as a clear sign to hold on to him for dear life. It wasn't just Luka who they nabbed in this draft though. The Mavericks also drafted Jalen Brunson in the second round with the 33rd pick, another guard who would evolve into a superstar just a few years later. On this night in June 2018, the Mavericks came away with 2 franchise-changing talents, in what was perhaps the greatest single draft night an NBA team has ever had. 7 years later in 2025, they lost both of them thanks to their incompetence. In the 2018-19 season, rookie Luka proved within about 2 weeks of stepping on the court that he was a future Hall of Famer. Mark Cuban and the Mavs management quickly recognized this, so they rushed to overhaul the entire team and build around their new star. This haste would ultimately be a huge mistake. The Mavericks became too good too fast, aka they suffered from their own success. Literally 4 months into Luka's career, the Mavericks went all in on building a contender by trading for Kristaps Porzingis, a promising young center recovering from an ACL tear. It was a move that was praised at the time. The Mavericks were go-getters, and they weren't going to waste any time getting the rookie superstar some help. However, this was a massive error. It was bad enough that Porzingis turned out to be a poor fit who failed to reach his potential, but giving up 2 first-round picks to get him on top of this made the trade even worse. Following this move in 2019, the Mavericks would only control their first-round pick in 2 out of the next 5 drafts. To make matters worse, this trade wrecked their cap space. They were now paying Porzingis a max, Tim Hardaway Jr. $20 million, and Courtney Lee $12 million. Both these two were thrown in this trade by the Knicks because they were comically overpaid. This trade restricted the Mavs' financial flexibility to build around Luka, wiped out any chances of them landing a high draft pick, and created relentless pressure to win, leaving little room for player development. To quote the #1 Eagles fan Taylor Swift, this trade was a nightmare dressed like a daydream. But man, at the time, there was hype. The 2 Europeans envisioned as having incredible amounts of potential were now together, a movie-like scenario. In just a few months, the Mavs had overhauled their roster to fit Luka's ball-dominant playstyle, a style of play that had just won him the Rookie of the Year award. A generational talent was in Dallas, Texas, and now it was time to go win with him. In Luka's second season, Dallas snuck into the playoffs as the 7th seed, their first appearance there in 4 years. This was in large part thanks to Luka's stellar season, where he had perhaps the greatest sophomore stint out of any player in NBA history. His points per game climbed from 21 to 29, to go along with 9 dimes and 9 rebounds, a near triple-double average at an age where he couldn't even enter a bar legally. Fast forward to the bubble, and the vaunted second star Kristaps Porzingis began showing flashes of his dominance. After a slow start that even saw him get benched early on in the year due to poor play, Porzingis excelled in the NBA restart, averaging 30 and 10. Hype was rising in Dallas. It would be the LA Clippers who the Mavs would meet in round 1. A talented, borderline super team that had been predicted to win it all well before the season began. If Luka was truly the future GOAT that many believed he had the potential of being, then this was a perfect first challenge for him. Doncic is a man of many faults, but one thing he is rarely criticized for is his playoff performances. He shows up when the lights are brightest, and we first saw it here in the bubble, where he shell-shocked LA with a 31-10-9 average for the series. No moment was greater than in Game 4, where Luka hit one of the most iconic game winners in NBA history.
Doncic pulls up, three-pointer. Bang! Bang! It's good! Doncic wins the game at the buzzer!
A fearless, confident killer had been born. This shot capped off a 43-point, 17-rebound, 13-assist night. Prime Chris Smooth numbers. Alas, this would be the last memorable moment for the Mavs this season. LA quickly responded and beat them in games 5 and 6. It's impressive enough that Dallas took the stacked LA team to 6 here, but it's even more impressive when you realize they were without Jalen Brunson for the whole series and Kristaps Porzingis for most of it. Brunson had been out since March with a shoulder injury, while KP had suffered a torn meniscus in Game 1 that permanently sidelined him after Game 3. This torn meniscus specifically was a major blow to Porzingis' Mavericks tenure because it halted his momentum. He had been in the midst of a successful bubble stretch where he was cementing himself as a vital piece to the team's success. This injury stopped all that in its tracks. His conditioning took a permanent decline with the team following this injury. He never got back to the speed and quickness he had in the bubble. Thus, in retrospect, the 2020 playoffs served as both a positive and negative warning of what was to come in the Luka Doncic era. On one side, you'd have the glory that would come from Luka and his playoff excellence. On the other, the looming shadow of injuries and lack of support which threatened to derail this greatness. Rather than building on this strong showing in 2020's offseason, the Mavs instead failed to capitalize with a plethora of head-scratching moves. First in the draft, despite having 1 first and 2 high second-round picks, they came away with 0 contributors, most embarrassingly choosing Josh Green with the 18th pick over Tyrese Maxey, who was taken 3 picks later. Seriously, there was a real possibility that we could have seen Maxey, Brunson, Porzingis, and Luka all on the same team, but nope. The other 2 picks sucked as well. Tyler Bay lasted 1 season before going overseas, and Tyrell Terry retired 2 seasons into his career due to anxiety. Then, in a pathetic attempt to address their defensive woes, the Mavs traded Seth Curry for Josh Richardson, a complete F- of a deal. Curry would go on to have a breakout season with the Sixers, becoming one of the league's best role players, while Richardson struggled to fit on offense and failed to make a significant impact on the defensive end. The 2020 offseason was a cataclysmic disaster for Dallas, and one of the biggest reasons why Luka is now in LA. Thanks to these boneheaded moves, rather than becoming a true contender, Dallas had a drama-filled, painfully average 2020-21 campaign. First, the Porzingis problem. He missed 29 games due to knee and back problems, which made it impossible for him to gain any chemistry with Luka. On the court, the two rarely high-fived or communicated directly with each other. The situation was described as awkward by NBA analysts. Along with the chemistry problems, Porzingis just wasn't a good enough contributor. His lack of mobility thanks to the meniscus surgery had rendered him a defensive liability. He was owed $100 million over the next 3 years, a contract widely viewed as an albatross across the league. These problems became national headlines once the 2021 playoffs rolled around. After jumping out to a 2-0 lead, the Mavericks lost 4 out of the next 5, dropping the series in 7 to the LA Clippers once again. Luka played spectacularly, averaging 35, but no one else stepped up. KP, the guy expected to be the Robin to Luka's Batman, had a horrible series. He scored just 13 a game with 5 rebounds on 47% from the field and 29.6% from 3. He admitted that he wasn't giving full effort, but he accused coach Rick Carlisle of being at fault.
What? Me?
Carlisle had forced Porzingis to completely eliminate the post-up from his offensive repertoire, turning him into a decoy and making him stand on the perimeter while Luka cooked. Coach Carlisle said the post-up wasn't a good play anymore, and felt the team would be much better if KP became a catch-and-shoot guy instead. Porzingis couldn't stand it. The relationship between him and the organization was in shambles. Luka's 3rd season had come and gone, and with no playoff success to show for it, the Mavericks needed to make some big changes. The summer of 2021 saw a slew of key organizational pieces part way with the Mavs that set the stage for what we have today. It's important to note that up until this point, none of the front office decisions I've listed so far were done by Nico Harrison, the executive Mavs fans currently want to publicly execute. No, these moves were all done by Donnie Nelson, a longtime executive for the franchise, who was officially fired after 24 seasons on the job in June 2021. This wasn't an easy breakup either. Nelson would end up filing a lawsuit after this firing. He claimed that the real reason he was let go of was not because of his poor moves, but because he exposed a sexual harassment case within the organization. The sexual harassment, Nelson claims, was allegedly perpetrated by someone close to Mark Cuban. Even more horrifying was that the person who was reported as being sexually assaulted was Nelson's nephew. This all allegedly occurred in a hotel room during the 2020 All-Star Weekend in Chicago. The Mavs responded to Nelson and denied these accusations, saying he was only fired because of poor job performance. Dallas then flipped the script and said that back in the summer of 2020, Donnie Nelson approached Mark Cuban and tried to use this alleged sexual harassment incident to extort the Mavericks into giving him an extended contract. Yeah, both sides were accusing the others of crimes essentially. Just an average Tuesday for the Dallas Mavericks. The case was eventually settled and dropped in late 2024, but the incident still left a bad taste in Luka's mouth and wouldn't be easily forgotten. He was reportedly really upset about Nelson's exit, saying that he really liked Donnie and that he knew him since he was a kid. This firing had a domino effect, because next up to leave was Rick Carlisle, who resigned just 1 day after Donnie left. It was a bit of a surprising exit, given the fact that coaching such a young superstar like Luka was a rare opportunity. Carlisle felt that rather than waiting to be fired because he was clearly on the hot seat, pursuing a different opportunity with Indiana would be smarter. It was no secret that the relationship between Doncic and Coach Carlisle had deteriorated beyond repair as well. Luka was constantly spotted yelling at him during the games. The young star quote-unquote hated how Rick treated other people, especially Dennis Smith Jr. and Salah Mejri, both of whom Carlisle repeatedly humiliated and embarrassed in the locker room. The coach and the executive were now gone, representing a new era in Dallas. Replacing them would be 1. Jason Kidd, and 2. Wait for it. Yeah, Nico Harrison. First, Kidd. His hiring came with mixed feelings. On one hand, he had been previously accused of domestic abuse in 2001 and had a DWI in 2012. He also had a coaching track record of failure, both with the Nets and Bucks. On the other hand, he had been drafted by Dallas and won a championship with them in 2011. So I guess that's a good reason to overlook the whole abuse thing, right? Nico Harrison had been previously working as a Nike executive for the past 2 decades, and had connections with many NBA stars, so Dallas figured he'd bring fresh thinking to the organization. Oh yeah, he'd bring fresh thinking alright. You'd think such sudden changes to the team's continuity would negatively impact Dallas, but no. The 2021-22 season stands out as one of their best ones with Luka. They won 52 games, the most they'd ever win in a regular season in this era. To begin the year though, they sucked. Why? Because Luka was fat. Yes, the 2021-22 season marked the beginning of the discourse and drama surrounding Luka's weight. In his rookie year, he weighed 218 pounds. By year 2, it had ballooned to 230. If he was able to maintain that weight though, he'd be fine. But no, when he arrived at training camp here in the 2021-22 season, he weighed 260 pounds. Apparently, it was the second straight year he had entered camp looking like a Slovenian Peter Griffin. My boy was eating good in Dallas. Luka attributed this weight to his Olympics play. In the summer of 2021, he played for his hometown Slovenia, and after leading them to a 4th place finish, he admitted to, in his words, relaxing a little bit, maybe too much. He was heavily criticized by the national media for this, being described by Kevin Harlan as worn out, and by Reggie Miller as the heaviest he's ever seen Luka. This was only the beginning of Luka's weight problems. A year in which many expected him to chase after his first MVP got derailed because of this. After a few months though, he managed to get this weight under control, dropping down into the 240s range. The Mavs saw success as a result, winning 36 of their last 48 games. Dallas was also successful in this stretch due to the breakout of Jalen Brunson. The former second-round pick finally became a consistent starter in year 4, and saw a major jump in his stats thanks to this opportunity. He put up 16 a game on efficient shooting. It was a rise that surprised everyone, including Dallas themselves. Back in the summer of 2021, the Mavericks had the chance to offer him a 4-year, $55 million deal. The Brunson family was eager to sign it, as Jalen had no problem being Luka's sidekick. In a newly released article by ESPN writer Tim McMahon, the Brunson family recalls being on vacation at this time, discussing the type of houses they'd buy in Dallas once this deal was signed. But once the Mavericks called them up and said they had to rethink giving him this deal, the Brunson fam's vacation was ruined. Dallas had limited cap flexibility thanks to the whole Porzingis debacle, and wanted to stay under the luxury tax by any means necessary. Fast forward to the 2022 trade deadline, and Brunson's value had gone up. Jalen's team was still willing to accept an increased offer of 5 years, $87 million though, a deal that could be made if Dallas simply traded Tim Hardaway Jr. The Mavs decided against parting ways with THJ though, and instead threw a lowball deal at Brunson of 4 years, $55 million, money that he had clearly outgrown by that point. It was declined, and a deal had failed to be reached again. So, the can was kicked down the road once more. Maybe the Mavericks would be able to keep him, but it would have to be addressed later in the summer of 2022. In the meantime, at the deadline, the Kristaps-Porzingis era came to an end in a trade to Washington that brought back Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. Porzingis' health had further collapsed into a pit of misery. He had missed 22 of the 55 games that year due to various injuries. The Mavs, being 14-8 without him, felt confident that dumping his huge long-term salary was worth it. All of this set the stage for the 2022 postseason, one where the Mavs entered as the 4th seed, where anything was possible since they had Wonder Boy. Oh wait, you're telling me he strained his calf in the meaningless final game of the regular season? Oh boy. Doncic would miss the first 3 games of the postseason as a result. For any team, losing their best player in such a crucial time would mean inevitable disaster. For Dallas, though, it provided a key opportunity for one small guard from Villanova to prove his worth.
It's a playoff game, and Jalen Brunson drops 41.
The 2022 playoffs represented the first warning shot by Jalen Brunson to the NBA world that he was on the rise. In the 3 games without Luka against Utah in round 1, JB shockingly averaged 31 points per game on 50-41 splits, guiding the Mavs to a 2-1 lead. He genuinely saved their season with his elite play, opening the door for Luka to come back in Game 4 and help finish the job. The Mavs ultimately won this first round series in 6. Jalen Brunson was the man responsible for the success. In round 2, though, they faced an even bigger challenge. The 64-win Phoenix Suns were the runaway best squad in the league during the regular season, and they were hungry to quash the Mavericks' little feel-good story. After jumping out to a 2-0 series lead, everything was going as planned. But then, the Mavs took Game 3 at home thanks to Brunson's 28, and then they won by 10 again to tie the series at 2. Both teams traded blows in Games 5 and 6, setting up a must-watch Game 7 in Phoenix, Arizona. The expectation was that while Dallas certainly deserved a pat on the back for making it this far, it was now time to lay down and get kicked in the ass by Phoenix. We all know what happened in Game 7 though. One of the most stunning victories I've ever seen in basketball. The Mavericks, led by Luka with his calm, confident, and collected play, shockingly destroyed the Suns on their home floor, holding them to just 27 first-half points. The whole NBA world watched in awe as the Suns inexplicably collapsed. It's as if all their basketball powers were magically taken away from them. Luka and the Mavs feasted as a result. The signature moment, when in the final minute of the first half, Luka dropped Cam Johnson and nailed a 3. Doncic single-handedly outscored the entire Suns team in the first half, with no words more fitting than what Kevin Harlan remarked live on TV.
They're shredding them.
Shredding them they were. The Mavs won by 33, a score that doesn't do this blowout any justice. It was over just about 15 minutes into it. A game like this was one that took all of the fears and worries the Dallas franchise had and evaporated them. Any rumors of contract negotiations, bad trades, beef, drama, all of it was irrelevant. Because for as long as Luka Wonderboy Doncic was on their team, everything would be okay. Just hold on to him for dear life, and he will guide you through the smoke and flames with a sword in one hand and a basketball in the other. Dallas was moving on to the Western Conference Finals for the first time in a decade. This major achievement had a celebration that was short-lived though, because a gentleman's sweep against Golden State would be the Mavs' fate here. In large part due to the role players crumbling, poor rebounding, and the Warriors' roster talent. The Mavericks were no match for the eventual champions. Fans were disappointed, but extremely grateful. That show against the Suns in Game 7 was an all-time moment the franchise would savor forever. And the greatest part about it all? It served as a preview. The Western Conference was in trouble. Luka Doncic was here, and was only getting better. It was only a matter of time until the Mavericks would break through into NBA glory. After watching Jalen Brunson kill it in the playoffs, the entire league was buzzing, wondering how much money he'd get come free agency time. Over $100 million? Less than that? Well, you could trade stuff like that and more with the sponsor of today's video, Kalshi. Kalshi is the first and only legal prediction market that lets you trade on real-world events in all 50 states. AKA, you can trade on literally anything you want, from crypto to politics to movies to sports and more. I mean, seriously, look at the front page here. You can trade on who will win the Nathan's hot dog eating contest, or the number of tornadoes we'll get this month. For the upcoming NBA draft, it looks like VJ Edgecombe is going to be the third pick, according to the 64% odds. Well, if you're a big believer in Trey Johnson like I am, you could trade something like $10 and get $59 if he goes third instead. Someone better tell Daryl Morey to lock in, cause I got money on the line here. If you want to support the channel and trade on some wild stuff, then sign up to Kalshi using my link in the description, kalshi.com/DylanDoesBasketball. The first 500 traders that trade 100 contracts will get a free $10 credit, so you should get to it. Anyways, where were we? Usually, if your team makes the Western Conference Finals in such an impressive fashion with a young star, you naturally expect them to continue to evolve and strive for even better results the following season. That didn't happen with Dallas though. Right after being eliminated by the Warriors, Mark Cuban expressed that the Mavs would obviously re-sign JB when referring to what needed to be done in the summer. In the leading weeks to free agency though, Brunson's team reportedly heard nothing but crickets from the Mavs organization, which was surprising. Cuban had earlier claimed that Brunson was worth Fred VanVleet money, aka $21 million a year. They weren't going any higher than that. While the Mavericks were in deep thinking, the Knicks were aggressively pursuing Brunson, making a series of trades that gave them the cap space necessary to throw him big money. They made their desire to acquire him no secret, even signing Rick Brunson, JB's dad, to the squad as an assistant coach. Still, with all this going on though, Brunson's team remained optimistic that Mark Cuban would give in and offer them all the necessary money. If that happened, they'd happily accept, despite all the drama. It all came down to one last meeting between the two once free agency officially started on June 30th. Mark Cuban didn't budge from his word though, refusing to match the 4-year, $104 million deal offered by the Knicks. The meeting was cancelled, with both sides blaming each other for the falling out. It didn't matter though. Money talked, and the Knicks were offering the biggest wad of cash to the young guard. Brunson was gone, and quickly broke out into a superstar under the bright lights in New York City. The Mavericks were left dead in the water. This was an oversight of preposterous proportions, a horrific show of incompetence by the team's front office, and the major reason why the Mavs suck so bad in the 2022-23 season. Their team missed the playoffs, essentially throwing the last few weeks of the season to try and avoid their top 10 protected draft pick going to New York. They had no defense. It had gone from being ranked 6th best in 21-22 to 22nd in 22-23. They had no rebounding. They had a terrible bench, and quite frankly, a terrible roster. What makes the decision to drop Brunson even more idiotic was how just a few months later, they traded 2 key role players and some picks for Kyrie Irving, a guard who was literally on the same talent level as Brunson, but 5 years older. Sorry, Kyrie fans. If you wanted a star guard, why not just keep the one you already have and keep your assets while you're at it? Mind-numbing levels of indifference from a franchise employing one of the greatest prodigies in NBA history. Speaking of this prodigy though, things weren't all rosy for Luka either. His weight was still a major issue. He was challenging Zion Williamson for the title of GTOAT, greatest tubby of all time. Entering the 2022-23 season, he arrived looking slimmer than usual, but still ran into conditioning problems at the end of games, where he'd often run out of steam. His field goal percentage dropped from 49.1% in the third quarter to 46.3% in the final period. Watching rookie Luka highlights versus 5th-year Luka highlights showed an improved player, no doubt, but at the same time showed a slower, less explosive, far athletic one too. The stats back this up as well. In his rookie year, he threw down 24 dunks. By his 5th year, that had halved to 12. Then the next year, in 2023-24, he dunked just twice. And no, this is not some 4D chess move to protect his body. This was done because the guy aged faster than Obama did during his presidency. Doncic admitted himself that it was difficult to maintain a healthy diet. He had moments where he locked in and lost weight, but those usually didn't last long. The guy just couldn't resist his hookah and alcohol. This struggle to remain in shape reportedly created tension between him and the Mavs organization. Dallas went 9-18 after acquiring Irving, a shocking downfall. The trade was flashy, but failed to address any of their other roster needs. The Luka Doncic era in Dallas had gone from full of excitement to a familiar feeling of dread. So how did they take this mediocre season and flip themselves into Western Conference champions just a year later? The real reason behind the Mavs' major leap from this year to the next came from the moves they made after the 2023-24 season began. At the trade deadline, they traded free agent offseason signing Grant Williams, Seth Curry, who was washed by this point, and a pick to the Hornets for PJ Washington. Then, they traded Richaun Holmes and a first for Daniel Gafford. By doing this, the Mavs acquired two starters that fit in seamlessly for a relatively low cost. On top of this, Luka and Kyrie were beginning to get the rhythm, and it showed post-All-Star break, where Dallas went from 26-23 to 50-32 by the end of the year. The Mavs defense also turned it up to another level. After the deadline, they jumped to 7th in defensive rating, and improved further to 2nd by March. The Mavs were beginning to gain momentum, but could they prove themselves against the best in the West? Dallas first took advantage of a battered and bruised Clippers team in round 1, beating them in 6 thanks to great defense and strong play from Luka and Kai. Like when Jordan finally beat the Pistons, Luka had at long last gotten over the massive hump that was the LA Clippers. In round 2, the number 1 seeded young gunning Thunder were up next to try and decapitate the surging Mavs. And unlike the previous series, Dallas was genuinely vulnerable here. Luka was dealing with a series of nagging injuries that hampered his athleticism. A knee sprain, ankle sprain, back injury, and a sore Achilles. According to reports, if it had been the regular season, he would have been sidelined for at least 2 weeks. Through the first 4 games, the series was tied at 2, and Doncic was clearly not himself. He was averaging just 22 points per game on 39% field goal shooting, doing his best Joel Embiid impression in a time where he should have been performing like Nikola Jokic. But in Game 5, bang, he reminded everyone of who he was, an overweight white guy from the Balkans. The Don scored 31 points, dished out 11 assists, grabbed 10 rebounds, and most importantly, got the dub. Game 6 was even more memorable though, because Dallas won by the skin of their teeth in a ridiculous 17-point comeback. The difference in this win were the role players. PJ Washington, Derrick Jones Jr., and rookie Derek Lively II all contributed by doing the little things, whether it was good defense or timely buckets. Dallas was on to their second conference finals in 3 years. Then, they easily steamrolled the former play-in champion Minnesota Timberwolves in 5. The best moment of this series by far for Dallas came in Game 2, where Luka had yet another MJ moment. Down by 2 with the final seconds winding down the clock, he put Rudy Gobert into the blender, hitting him with a series of moves followed by a ridiculous step-back 3. Yet another legendary clutch shot had been added to Luka's resume. By this point, Minnesota's morale was in the dirt. In Game 3, Dallas won again, with the chef's kiss moment coming in the final 35 seconds of this game, where Luka threw a perfect pass to a cutting Daniel Gafford for the big-time flush. Dagger. Listen to the arena here. A complete eruption of tens of thousands of screaming fans. Everyone knew that for the first time in 13 years, the Mavericks were heading to the NBA Finals. Shockingly though, this moment, 6 years after drafting Doncic, would stand as the final truly great and unforgettable memory they'd ever share with him. It was all downhill from here. Because even in this joyous time, there were visible cracks forming in the relationship between the Mavs and Luka. Afterwards, during the team's locker room celebration in Minnesota after they clinched the finals, Mavs assistant GM and former player Michael Finley calmly snatched Luka's beer from out of his hand while greeting his father. It was a shocking level of audacity that, in retrospect, clearly shows how concerned the Mavs remained about Luka's health even in a moment of celebration. They had zero trust in him. At the time though, it was simply written off as a lighthearted gag. Next up, the 2024 NBA Finals, which were miserable for Dallas. They lost in 5 to the Boston Celtics, a team that was far more talented. Boston overwhelmed Dallas with their defense. Both Derek White and Drew Holiday shut down Kyrie and Luka. These two needed to be at their best for Dallas to have a fighting chance, and they just weren't. Kyrie specifically was very underwhelming. He averaged just 19 a game, on 41% from the field and 27% from 3. In Boston specifically, his stats dipped to an even worse 14 points per game, on 34% field goal shooting and 17% from 3. Those numbers weren't going to get the job done. Doncic played well, however he was bothered by a series of injuries and had to take pain-killing injections before games to play. Ultimately, he wasn't at fault here. The Mavs' role players and Kyrie's lack of help were this squad's downfall. Similarly to 2022's ending, fans of the Mavs were disappointed at how abruptly their season had come to a close. More than anything else though, they remained hopeful. Each year, they were getting closer and closer to their end goal of a championship. All they needed was another piece, and a pinch of good luck to help push them over the edge. Nico Harrison, the executive who had put together an impressive resume in just 3 years, was about to swing for the fences. The only thing that's better than having one experienced champion on your team is having two. Joining Kyrie and Luka would be Klay Thompson, who was acquired right as free agency opened in a sign-and-trade. The Mavs threw the last bits of their money at him, a 3-year, $50 million deal, because they believed he brought the shooting and veteran leadership necessary to take them to the next level. A big three had been created in Dallas, with hefty expectations placed on them of not only making it to the finals, but legitimately winning it as well. The Mavs appeared to be a well-oiled machine destined for success. However, once the 2024-25 season rolled around, that machine exploded into a million pieces. This year, of course, marks the last time Luka was a Maverick. So where did things start to go wrong? The Mavs opened up the year favorably, going 16-8. They had won a handful of their games without Doncic, who had sat out a stretch of 5 games, 11 days total, in late November with what was reported as a right wrist sprain. The reality, though, is that Doncic wasn't sitting just to recover, but to lose weight. He had ballooned back to 260 pounds, 15 over what the Mavs preferred he should weigh. This was now the second time he had been temporarily shut down to shed off extra pounds. The same had occurred back in December 2021. Things got even more testy when on December 15th, Doncic suffered a left heel bruise against the Warriors. He returned 10 days later to play on Christmas, where he ended up straining his left calf, his 4th calf injury in a 28-month span. Nico Harrison and his staff believed it was the result of poor conditioning. This injury suffered on Christmas Day marked a turning point in the Luka-Mavs relationship. It was starting to deteriorate. Luka's team believed he needed to sit out for 6 weeks to heal this injury properly, and had felt that the Mavs rushed him back to play on Christmas Day, to the point where Doncic was playing on his toes to reduce his discomfort. Nico Harrison disagreed, and chalked all this up as a consequence of Luka's poor conditioning. He demanded that Doncic return in only 2 to 3 weeks. Who did Nico get to back him up on this? The director of player health and performance, Johan Billsborough. Billsborough had been controversially hired in the fall of 2023. Now, who did this Billsborough guy replace? Casey Smith, who had held the position for nearly 2 decades. Smith had earned the trust of legends like Dirk Nowitzki, and was revered by other players like Luka because he advocated for proper recovery times for players' injuries. So why was Casey Smith fired and replaced with Johan Billsborough? Because Smith's influence in the organization threatened Nico Harrison. Smith's opinions on free agency and player health matters carried considerable weight, and the two often intensely disagreed. Like when the Mavs brought in Christian Wood in 2022, Casey Smith was vocally against it and warned Nico about trading for him. Nico went ahead though, trading valued role players and a first-rounder for Wood, a guy who wouldn't even be in the NBA 2 years later. Nico Harrison wanted yes men, and Casey Smith was not that guy, so he needed to go. Replacing him was the aforementioned Johan Billsborough. Might I just add that Smith, who had worked with the franchise for 2 decades like I said, was fired by Nico on video call while he was attending to his gravely ill mother in Ohio. Unreal. Then, Smith joined the Knicks, where he and New York's training staff ended up winning the Athletic Training Staff of the Year award in the 2024-25 season. Good going, Nico. Now, we circle back to Christmas Day. Billsborough was on Nico's side, believing Doncic, who had just hurt his calf, needed to return in just 2 to 3 weeks instead of 6. Doncic had no respect for Billsborough. Eventually, though, the Mavs gave in, setting a target return date of February 8th, 6 weeks. As a result of this madness, the divide between Luka and the Mavs had deepened further. Another person I haven't mentioned in this equation is Keith Belton, the Mavericks' athletic performance director. He was also brought in alongside Billsborough in Nico Harrison's quest to replace Casey Smith in 2023. And he was just fired, by the way. In the short period he was employed by Dallas, though, he was described as a glorified cheerleader by one team source. Belton was yet another yes man that further destroyed the Mavericks' internal cohesion. In January 2025, center Derek Lively hurt his ankle. Our new friend Keith Belton was in charge of handling the situation. Now's your time to shine, buddy. Well, he didn't shine. In fact, he almost ended Lively's NBA career entirely with his incompetence. After Lively had hurt his ankle, Belton put him through a series of intense workouts, with the goal of returning him back to the lineup after only a few days of recovery from this injury. Johan Billsborough, watching all this from the sidelines, noticed that Lively wasn't looking too good in all this training, so he personally intervened and forced Lively to undergo a CT scan. That later revealed he had a stress fracture in his ankle, an injury that has a recovery time of 6 to 8 weeks. You heard that right. Keith Belton almost forced Lively to return in just a few days from an injury with a 2-month recovery timeline. This horrible mismanagement led to a loud, heated confrontation between Billsborough and Belton that began in the trainer's locker room at the practice facility and continued into the weight room. No punches, but they were going at it, was one quote from a witness. These two new kids on the block didn't exactly like each other, with neither respecting the other's resume and achievements. This embarrassing incident further exposed the chaos within the Mavericks training staff. Remember, this all stems from Nico Harrison firing Casey Smith because he wanted to protect his job. Smith always had things under control. He was just one of many in the training staff who got the axe. Nico also fired strength coach Jeremy Hossipel and manual therapist Casey Spangler. These two were let go right after the Mavs' 2024 finals appearance. The reasoning? Nico believed it would help Luka's conditioning more. In reality, this just annoyed the superstar because he enjoyed working with those guys. They get rid of everybody I like, Doncic told an ESPN source. These firings only built a bigger wall of disdain between Luka and Nico. Rather than working with the new guys Nico hired, Doncic ended up personally hiring a Slovenian national team strength coach and Real Madrid nutritionist to help him instead. On January 29, 2025, 5 weeks after his Christmas calf injury, Nico Harrison and his clique came knocking on Luka's door. They wanted him to start ramping up now. He requested that Doncic join the team on their 5-game road trip, not to play, but to scrimmage and get closer to the finish line. Doncic rejected the invitation. He wanted to stay in Dallas and have access to all of the equipment that was in their practice facility. As a compromise, Luka offered to practice with the Texas Legends, the Mavericks G League affiliate in nearby Frisco. Instead of getting back a response, communication between Doncic's camp and the Mavericks front office ceased. Nico Harrison was outraged at Doncic's behavior and complained behind closed doors that Luka was holding the team hostage and prioritizing personal recovery over team obligations. This was the breaking point. Throughout January, while this saga was unfolding, Harrison had begun secretly negotiating a trade with the Los Angeles Lakers. The next time the Mavs and Luka spoke came when the move was announced. The era was over, in a trade that shocked the planet.
The Lakers have traded Anthony Davis to the Dallas Mavericks in exchange for Luka Doncic. What?
I did know that Luka was important to the fan base. I didn't quite know it to what level.
You hang up the phone the night you're traded, and you threw it?
Yes.
Superstars at 25 don't get traded. Luka's a mega star. Coming off the NBA Finals, like you just don't see that in the NBA.
What were you feeling in that moment?
Sadness, mostly. I was still in shock, like crazy shock, and I felt like my heart was broken, honestly.
I'll never forget where I was when I found out about this trade, and you won't either. It read like an NBA Centel tweet, like Shams' Twitter account had been hacked. But no, this was real life. Luka was headed to the Lakers for Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 first-round pick. The first question people asked when hearing about this trade was how in the world could they trade Luka? The second was asking why they got such a pathetic return. The problem that Nico Harrison and the Mavs front office failed to understand was that trading Luka itself wasn't necessarily a horrible idea, but to trade him in total secrecy without maximizing his value is mind-numbingly stupid. In an attempt to sheepishly explain their perspective, the Mavs leaked several stories to the media about how Luka was overweight and didn't want to work hard enough. None of these desperate attempts at justifying this trade worked though. The entire NBA world was shocked and furious at the audacity of the Dallas Mavericks. Luka was of course the most surprised. Upon learning of the news, he threw his phone across the room, which left it with a crack. He was absolutely stunned and heartbroken. Naturally, dozens of conspiracy theories have spawned from this as well. Let's review some of them. Did the NBA force Dallas to trade Luka to the great market of LA because the league's ratings were down? And as compensation, did they reward them with the #1 pick in the 2025 draft? Similar coincidental situations have happened before. Like in 2019, the Pelicans won the lottery despite having a 6% chance. This encouraged them to trade Anthony Davis to the Lakers since they could get a new franchise player in Zion Williamson. Or like in 2014, when the Cavs with 1.7% odds got the top pick. This gave them a much-needed trade asset they could use to acquire help for LeBron James, who is rumored to be interested in returning to the team. Needless to say, this wouldn't be the first time the NBA has been accused of rigging the lottery to help fulfill their agendas. This conspiracy certainly makes sense on the surface, but in the countless hours I've spent researching this, I've yet to find one credible insider source that backs this up. It doesn't appear like the NBA had their hands in this. Even if the Mavs and Adam Silver had agreed in February to swap Luka for Cooper Flagg, there was no guarantee that the Mavericks would even be in play for the #1 pick at all. Remember, at the time, this squad had a healthy Kyrie and AD. Everyone expected them to at least make the playoffs. Few could have predicted that the two stars would suffer significant injuries that ultimately pushed Dallas down into the lottery. So I'd rate this conspiracy theory as unlikely. Another theory is that Dallas made this trade because they're trying to move the team to Las Vegas. One of the first questions that popped up all over social media when this trade went down was asking how Mark Cuban, the longtime owner and Mavs superfan, could have possibly allowed this. What these people didn't know was that Cuban no longer owned the team. In late 2023, he agreed to sell his majority stake of the Mavs to the Miriam Adelson family, a family of billionaires who became rich by founding the casino company called the Las Vegas Sands. The theory goes that by trading Luka, the Mavs fan support would tank, giving them more leverage to ditch boring Dallas for the bright lights of Vegas. Any traction this theory had though was quashed when the Mavs landed the top pick. Now with Cooper Flagg, the Mavs fan support is back and not going anywhere, making it extremely difficult to move to Vegas without severe consequences. The third theory is that Nico Harrison is just a moron. Perhaps he had gotten so high on his newfound power that he believed he was a god incapable of doing anything wrong. Trading Luka, who had been giving him quite the troubles behind the scenes with his weight and questionable work ethic, sounded reasonable to a guy who had surrounded himself with nothing but yes men. He subscribed to the motto of defense wins championships, and was in love with Anthony Davis, who he believed was the perfect piece for his chessboard. According to Nico, if he had gone public with wanting to trade Luka, other teams would have been alerted, and it would have jeopardized their ability to acquire Davis. I totally disagree with this last argument, as there's no doubt the Lakers still would have offered Davis to Dallas whether it was in private or in public. Out of all the conspiracies surrounding this trade, this one about Nico just being plain delusional holds the most weight for me. With an ownership that couldn't care less about the Mavericks, and with a front office staff that bowed down to him, Nico Harrison was free to do what he wanted. He had grown sick of Luka's shenanigans, and desired to put an end to it while receiving a player he loved in exchange. It's just as simple as that. Now, just a few months after the unbelievable Luka trade, both sides of the coin are headed off in vastly different directions. For Luka, a Grand Canyon-sized light has now been flashed on him. When he plays incredible, everyone will know since he's in LA, and his brand has the opportunity to rise to new heights. However, the flip side of that is that when he fails, there will be nowhere to hide from the criticism. His first season with the Lakers proved this. In the 2025 playoffs, LA was surprisingly eliminated in round 1, in a series where Luka was largely unimpressive. His defense was laughably miserable. He gave no effort whatsoever. He looked horribly out of shape, it's like the guy would struggle to guard my 13-year-old cousin. If that trade wasn't a good enough wake-up call for him, then nothing is. Now, it's time to see if he wants to do what's necessary to be an NBA champion, because this current style of play ain't gonna cut it. For the Mavericks, their fall from a respected up-and-coming franchise to a laughingstock has not just surprised the NBA, but the entire sports world as a whole. A lifeline may have just been thrown their way in the form of Cooper Flag though. Somehow, the Mavericks have landed a new potential superstar. If they have any desire to actually win with this new rookie, then they must take a hard look at the Luka era and learn from the mistakes that buried them. And that leads us to the biggest question of all. Where has Dylan Does Basketball been? Yeah, I haven't uploaded since March. Not good. Well, I spent the first 5 months of this year studying in Europe, living in a small home with a random French family. I'm back to my normal life now, so expect content at a regular output again. The NBA just keeps getting crazier, and I have a lot to cover. Thanks for watching.